Welcome, everyone, to your $1 million plus media budget deserves better. Our guest today is Courtney Hiller, founder of All Points Agency, a performance marketing agency for ambitious brands, and our partner in media buying for clients of Austin Lawrence Group. Welcome to the webinar, Courtney.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
We're excited to have you here and to share some of the best practices that we've worked on together for our shared clients. But before we get started, could you please tell our audience a little bit more about yourself and All Points?
Of course. So I'm the founder of All Points. We are a performance-obsessed growth agency. We're a little different than other agencies because we're really rooted in the timeless principles of great marketing, but we're bringing that to the era of today. My background is in cross-cultural communication and international marketing. So my passion is really in applying those principles to different brands, figuring out who their niche audiences are and how to speak to them most effectively across the digital spectrum.
Awesome. Thank you. And for those that don't know me, my name's Ken Lempit. I'm president at Austin Lawrence Group, and we're an agency that helps SaaS CEOs and GTM leaders to accelerate growth and enhance their profitability. And in today's world, a lot of what we have to do has changed in the B2B space, where we had a lot of organic traffic and conversions in the past. Over the past couple of years and accelerating dramatically recently, the organic channels have become a lot harder to convert on. So our recommendations and our agency services are much more tilted toward paid channels, and that's why we've partnered with Courtney and her amazing team at All Points. I want to get right into our conversation. We've got a lot of ground to cover. So the first thing we want to talk about is, how do we manage media today? It's not what it used to be just a few years ago. So what are the skill sets, tools, and team structures that modern SaaS marketers need to be effective? And how are changes in the platforms and buyer behavior influencing how media buying teams are built and operate? That's a big one, but
It's a great question. We're always trying to redefine it. But I think that right now in 2025, as everyone's going through major transformational shifts, paid media is no exception. You really need robust cross-functional teams with really deep expertise. So in order to effectively manage media across all of these different platforms, of course, you have your basic core skills. You need to be able to plan the media. You need to have the strategy, understand what the brand needs, analytics, understand the platforms, manage budgets. But there are a lot more emerging skills that we're seeing now that are so important in media management, including understanding creative and data-driven creative and how that impacts the bottom line. Aligning with sales teams, you really have to get out of the platforms and talk to the people who are the boots on the ground, optimize for lead quality. So, really understand what's happening after your role. You also need to really understand a very complex landscape with privacy and compliance and navigate a lot of that. On every platform, it's different. And then, of course, AI and automation, really maximizing all of the potential there. And then, of course, we have the soft skills that I think are really paramount for anyone who's managing media today. So we always want to find people at All Points who are curious. There's got to be a passion for really trying to understand and figure out the why. And that's what helps brands to get the best success. Being resourceful. Today, something might work great. Tomorrow, it might completely stop. Being able to really figure out how to take things apart and put them back together. I also think you need a really healthy dose of skepticism. You want to be careful it does not ever cross over into cynicism, but working with these platforms, there's always something going on behind the scenes that you need to really ask yourself, why is this happening? Is it a change of customer behavior? Is this an overall trend or shift that we really need to tap into? And lastly, really being able to understand and manage the relationships with stakeholders at all levels of the organization, because they're all looking for something different from you. A really great team that's managing all of this for brands needs to have a very deep bench, a lot of different skill sets, and a lot of collaboration going on.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And a lot of times we come to prospective clients and they're running most of $1 million in media or even more, and they've invested all that responsibility on one person. And from my experience, it's hard to find that one person that can be managing social media, paid search, and even direct purchase, an in-house person. So we're talking about either building or buying the skills of a team, right?
Yes, even just having someone who knows Meta inside and out and also knows Google inside and out, they are different skill sets. So even at the platform level, you tend to need different resources. But then within that, the same person who's coming up with the strategy is likely not going to be the best person to traffic the ads or to interpret the data. They all require different skill sets. So it's really good to have a mix of people who can give their best and collaborate together where everyone's really firing on all cylinders.
Yeah, and so I think I want to bring this back briefly to the title of the webinar, which is if you're managing $1 million budget, I don't think you want to have two, three, or $400,000 in overhead cost in that advertising group when you can outsource that for a lot better. And I realize I'm banging my own drum here, and it's a little self-promotional, but the problem we see is that clients do try to invest all of these responsibilities in one person, maybe one and a half people if you have strategy coming from a marketing leader and a digital marketer trying to wear all these hats on the buy. So I just think that's a place where people listening here have to look at their organization and resources and say, hey, am I underserving my budget here by trying to have it all done by one person?
Yeah, it's often hard to know what you're forsaking in terms of saving on fees or what you think you might be saving based on what you might be risking in performance. So I think that is important to realize. Obviously, I own an agency. I will always think working with an agency is a huge value add for any brand, but of course, understand that some brands want to do it in-house. I think there's always ways to work around that and still tap into that. But when we are working with brands, there's a ton of collaboration with the in-house team. And we really think we're there to increase capacity. We're there to bring a level of expertise and experience that really is hard to replicate in one or a small in-house team. But it really becomes an extension of their team because there's this constant feedback loop. There's so much happening in collaboration so that they can do what they do best, we can do what we do best, and then the ultimate results are paramount.
Yeah, and I think also we should just touch on what does the modern advertising kind of buffet look like? And we have them listed out here, but we're not on one platform and we're using different platforms for different things.
Yeah, you have to really come up with a media mix that is tailored to the brand and what you're trying to achieve. So I think a lot of people settle in thinking, okay, we need to be on LinkedIn, we need to be on Google, that should be enough. But we've got brands we're working with, even with, $1 million or under budgets that are on 6 different ad platforms in order to get in front of their niche audiences. So understanding all of the potential of those audiences and how to really master them to get the best results is what really drives the gap between you and your competitors.
Yeah, and we're going to touch on that ahead a little bit more in detail. So I think we can move on maybe to our next topic and we get to flip the script on this a little bit. You get
Yeah,
to,
I wanted to really get some insights from you on how you see advertising fitting into the account-based marketing strategy, and especially looking at those enterprise SaaS companies with really long sales cycles. So what do you think that the best account-based marketing advertising programs really do differently?
this is something that I think is really important. We're big followers of a guy named Kyle Poyar, who, if listeners aren't familiar with him, he used to be at OpenView Venture Partners. He's started his own venture capital firm and is still publishing on Substack. Amazing insights. And his go-to-market framework or how he's visualized it, I think is really important, where most enterprise SaaS companies, especially the firms we do the most business with in the 20 to maybe $100 million range, their addressable market and ICP lives within 2 to 3,000 firms, maybe 4,000 firms. And if they have 10 or 15 salespeople, that's a very manageable size prospect base to be doing outbound motions against. And the account-based marketing, the advertising component of it, have to really align with how they're strategizing against those few thousand prospects. There's the top 2 or 300 that they really want to do business with. That's sort of their strategic accounts, usually called that in the organization. And then there's a kind of an always changing group of accounts that are demonstrating a high degree of intent. That's the first party kind of data. The data we see on our website, it's in our CRM. And we know that these people have started to act in ways that make them possibly suspects. They're not necessarily prospects yet, but they're engaging with our content. They may have even had a phone call or a meeting or a demo with one of our BDRs. So they're beginning to look like prospective clients. And from an advertising standpoint, we want to drive ads to them to help them keep us in mind, right? It's our job to stay top of mind because they're probably looking at 2 or 3 solutions in a category, not just one. And we know it's not just the individual that has done the activity, but there's a buying team. So the work of sales and marketing and advertising would be to make sure for the accounts that are demonstrating some intent, some interest, that we start building out our CRM with all the contacts that we think could be involved in a buying decision and start getting content in front of them. And then also have the BDRs doing outreach to the wider group of people who might be interested. When we look at that wider group, they're also not all the same. The interests of the CFO are going to be different from the interests of the CEO or a head of sales or a head of manufacturing. So we want to make sure that we have creative from an advertising standpoint, from a content marketing standpoint, from an email marketing standpoint, and for the playbooks the BDRs are using, they're all tuned to those different personas, and that we keep top of mind by using a retargeting form of advertising, which is kind of like if you've shopped for, a tennis racket or shoes online, and then you go on the New York Times, you'll see that ad following you around the internet. We want to do that same kind of work. And we want to make sure that at the end of the day, we're tying back that activity, that investment in email and in advertising to our people getting into the pipeline. And if they're not, we have to try and suss out what did we miss? What didn't we do to get people moving forward? And also report our successes as people do move further through a buying process into pipeline. It's incumbent on the marketing and sales leadership to collaboratively report that success, build the success together, and then report it so that people know that what we're doing is working.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that speaks so much to the nuance that's needed in the content strategy that gets activated across all paid and owned channels, and making sure that it really speaks to every individual stakeholder in a way that is going to be most appealing to them.
Yeah, and I think this reporting and attribution thing really tough. But if we go back to this guy, Kyle Poyar, and I really suggest everybody subscribe to his Substack. It's his last name, Poyar. There are all these behaviors that you can see people exhibit that say they are engaged with you. Do they know about us? Do they engage with our content? Do they engage with our salespeople? Are we having meaningful conversations with them? Are they getting into our pipeline as a result? And your CRM, if it's not helping you do that reporting, might be a good time to look at your marketing infrastructure if you're having trouble doing that kind of reporting.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's time to talk channels. And you gave a hint of this, but for B2B SaaS marketers, what should they be thinking about the roles of LinkedIn, Meta, Reddit, TikTok, and direct ad placements? Where do these channels shine? What are the things we need to be careful of? And I want to highlight Reddit as you get to it because I think it's underplayed. Let's dig in.
Yeah, I think conceptually, from a high level, you have to think about two things. Where are my customers, and how can I reach them most efficiently using the right mix? So You obviously have LinkedIn. It gives you great targeting by job title, job function, by company. You can get in front of the exact decision makers, but it's expensive. Most brands can't justify paying anywhere from $3 to $10 CPCs, depending on the brand, all day. So you've got to look beyond that to other channels when it comes to actually creating the demand. So there are certainly some brands where Meta is a great option. You can get broad reach, you can get lower CPMs depending on the objectives that you're selecting. TikTok is even a fit for some because of storytelling, but there's fast creative cycles there. You've got to really be able to support it. So it's not right for everyone because you need to really be able to churn out content. And then Reddit, as discussed, it's a really wonderful emerging platform that helps you to really get in front of those people who are very passionate about what you're selling and how it's related to them because of all of the unique communities on there. And you can really get an incremental audience there because there's a lot of people on Reddit who are not active on other channels.
This is one of those unexpected things when I first came across the research on Reddit. It's truly what they call an unduplicated audience, which means that they aren't elsewhere, oddly, but they're very passionate and they are online participants. And we've found some good success in our work for clients on Reddit.
Yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite platforms nowadays because it's really community based, it's interest based. You can do some contextual advertising there in a way, but I think that it is one of the more challenging ones because Redditors do not like ads. And so it's a big challenge for us to make sure that those ad experiences feel like they are helpful in some way, that they don't take away from the platform, and that they really add value.
I think the important thing is that this is an opportunity like Facebook and Instagram were maybe 2 or 3 years ago, where B2B advertisers started, like there were some very early days, early adopters there, and they had a big jump on their competitors because people were saying, why would I want to do B2B advertising on Facebook? And now I don't see any B2B ad plans that don't consider Meta and even TikTok. It's kind of an interesting opportunity of the things that are available to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And as AI gets integrated more and more into these platforms, there really are even more opportunities to get in front of super niche audiences across all of them. We also always really like to include some element of programmatic advertising, whether that's display, native, even CTV, streaming audio. It really allows you to build awareness at scale. So you're really able to get in front of your audiences as typically more of an upper funnel play, but for brands with long journeys, this can really help to build that awareness and drive that consideration while managing overall ad costs because your CPMs are typically going to be much lower. You can get in front of people at a greater propensity for less money. When we see it as part of a media plan, we can see it drive down overall CPCs on other channels because we're more likely to get the click when someone is comfortable with the brand. They've seen the brand name in places that they know and trust.
I want to hover on the brand versus performance for a little bit. What's your coaching to clients about investing in brand awareness, brand building ads?
Yeah, it's funny because I own a performance marketing agency, but to me, you can't separate brand from performance anymore. You can't only focus on the bottom of the funnel. That leads us to Google. You've got that bottom of funnel capturing demand there. That's where the hand raisers are. So you always want to maximize that as much as possible. If there are people searching for what you want to make sure that you're capturing that. But overall, we've really got to expand beyond the thought of thinking we're going to get an ad in front of someone, they're going to click, they're going to sign up, they're going to become a customer. And there's just so much complexity to it. So I think having that brand focus is so important because it could be 6 to 9 months or longer before someone actually is ready to make that Google search and convert. And you're going to be able to win them so much more easily if they are aware of the brand and they have some confidence and trust in it.
Yeah, I'm gathering some research on this topic. There are people that have been publishing research recently on the impact of brand awareness, brand advertising on performance. And if anyone who's listening would like us to share that. Maybe we'll share links to that in the webinar recap, because I think it's a truly underappreciated aspect of driving down the cost of conversions. Just people don't appreciate it. They want to go right to the fruit without planting the seeds.
Yeah, great analogy. And then, of course, we have direct buys. So we incorporate these into media mixes as often as is needed and relevant and where the opportunities are. But we really want to reach those stakeholders where they're seeking expertise that's really relevant to their industry, to their trade. We want to make sure that we're maximizing those opportunities and getting that shared reputational capital of being on a trusted publication. And often those are more direct relationships. So when we're building a media strategy, it has to be personalized. It has to really be adaptable because we need to reach those audiences and we need to figure out the way to maximize the overall budget. Even if you have $1 million budget, that can go really fast across these channels. So we need to make sure we can maximize the amount of people that we reach and get them to do the end result that we're looking for at the most efficient cost.
Absolutely. So why don't we move on? This was a big surprise for me in the last 6 to 9 months. There's this constant pressure to develop more creative faster. And I didn't appreciate the reason for it. And actually, when we first started having these conversations, I almost felt like some internal resistance. I have this great ad. Why should I have to create 15, 20, 30 variations of my creative for a platform? So, what's changing on these platforms?
Yeah, unfortunately, gone are the days where you could really have one or a few ads that you could run for months and that they would drive performance. The platforms are really hungry now. These algorithms want to be fed more and more creative. I think it's an effect of TikTok really changed the game. And now Meta's hinted they might want to cut out the middleman. They want to have people just sign up for their service and put in your credit card and tell us what you want, and we'll get your ads in front of the right people. It makes sense. They're almost making the creative so unmanageable at this point that you might have no choice but to do that. I think that might be part of their plan, but that's me maybe crossing over my healthy skepticism into cynicism. So I have to pull myself back a little. But I do think that we have shorter ad lifespans now. You have to iterate, but that does not mean reinventing the wheel every time. If you need 10 ads instead of three, they don't all have to be completely unique. They can be different cuts of other previous ads that you are running. They can be a different hook, a different lead in, a different angle. So there are definitely ways to make it manageable. It's just that it's dovetailed needing creative volume and also short form video. You can end up having a lot of money in production costs and creator costs and all of that. So you really need to have these collaborative teams who can figure out how do we get the right creative in market, measure the rate of fatigue for an ad, and make sure that you're not wasting any dollars on things that are running out of steam in the market.
I think we also discussed that having multiple creative units allows us more opportunity to get impressions. So we're able to more quickly get the impressions we would need to achieve our objectives.
Yeah, so there's different formats, there's different placements, and there might be more inventory available for static images when most people are running videos. You may be able to get some extra real estate when there's less competition for a certain placement or a certain type of ad format. We've had periods of time where static images were just not working, and then we added them back in, and they do really well for some brands with infographics and really strong visuals. Sometimes carousels work great, sometimes they don't. So every single strategy has to figure out what works and what's the best way to package that information for that user on that platform at that time and make it work.
Yeah, and if people are wondering, like, how do I create 30, 40, 50, 60 ads a month? You have to start looking to AI enabled tools to help you spool up those variations. Especially again, if you're running 1 million or less in media, you don't want to have a full-time art director just sitting at his or her computer spooling up variations of the solid creatives. Got to be looking at platforms to help you do that.
Absolutely.
So I want to kind of shift gears because people are always focused on metrics. So what should CMOs and growth leaders actually track when they're running paid media? How do we approach attribution and justify the investment in advertising?
I think that click-through rate is one of those cues that a lot of brands focus on, but it's really distracting for most. Even looking at a cost per lead, cost per conversion, that doesn't really help you on a day-to-day basis to get the best results and optimize for efficiency. Overall, I think brands end up with too many KPIs. So I think you really need to have 1 to 2 primary KPIs that are your true north and 2 to 3 secondary that are directional. And we have to think about what's happening down funnel. So I know this is something we've talked about a lot because we need to make sure that, yes, we're getting the leads at a great cost, but we need to understand what that means in terms of the lead quality.
And I guess I'm concerned with things that aren't as easy to measure. And I keep trying to push our team in a couple of directions. One is this like influence over the velocity in the pipeline. And we have this thing we call meaningful conversations where we want to have our salespeople engage in conversations that they believe are driving prospects closer to pipeline. Is there a way for us to measure that, or is that stuff that we're going to have to ask salespeople to help us identify?
That's where that radical collaboration really comes in. We do need that feedback loop where we're getting the information on how these people are behaving down funnel, getting different tracking parameters on every single audience, every single campaign to make sure that they are turning into quality leads and then optimizing against what's happening 10 steps after they've touched a campaign. From the very first moment we serve an ad, we want to follow that user to the site. We want to look at what they're doing when they get there. We track everything. We look in Google Analytics or whatever analytics platform the brand is using. What are they doing in terms of engagement? How much time are they spending on the site? What are their rates of doing the key events, whether that's a lead form or seeking out more information, clicking on different buttons? So those are all things that are cues to us that we have an interested audience. They should perform well downstream, but we need to then figure out what are all those systems of checks and balances on that path to the actual lead turning into a sale that can help us to optimize. So a lot of that also means we need the offline data. We need the first party data coming back into the platforms. And that's not just hook up your CRM list and then you know who the customers are. It's creating unique niche segments in your CRM that you can then map to campaigns and be able to really understand how do I find more people who are going to behave like my best customers.
And that might either be a little bit of custom integration work, like with a Zapier, or we'd have to upload results to the
Yep.
platforms, right?
Yep, absolutely. But it is so integral and it really makes a big difference. And that helps the AI in all of these platforms, which is becoming an increasing part of the platforms to really be supercharged and to get better results.
You've mentioned something that's really important here, and it's a question we get asked. How do we integrate more AI into our marketing? And I think the platforms are doing a lot for us on the advertising side, right? They're leaning in intensely into making their platforms more effective through their own AI development, investing hundreds of millions, if not billions, in that.
Yes, absolutely. And they are making it hard to opt out of some of those things sometimes that you want to opt out of because by the time we're trafficking an ad, it's been approved by a client, it's got the right creative, it's got the right ad copy. We don't want to add in 10 more AI generated ad copies at the moment of publishing because then it needs to go back to the client for a review. So there's a lot of fluff in there that are like new bells and whistles for AI in these different platforms. Some of them are great and very helpful. Some of them don't work for all brands. But there's also the outside of the platform AI using ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini to come up with different storyboard ideas, different hooks, different angles, different value propositions, and then feed that into the overall creative and storytelling strategy.
Awesome. Yeah, and we're also even seeing a little bit of the VO3 video coming into B2B advertising. Some of it's purely for shock value, but I think some of it's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
I think I'd like to move on to our last topic, and we sort of started to discuss it here, but attribution is really important. It's managing expectations in an organization. And the sales cycle for our clients, the ones that we typically work with, are enterprise solutions that take 6 to 12 months to get a deal done. So how do we keep people's attention over that time frame and justify the investment in advertising?
Well, I have to take some responsibility for brands still thinking that they can fully attribute everything because as digital marketers, we really set that stage, 10, 15 years ago, telling people this is the whole value of digital. We can track and tag everything and we can know exactly what's happening. It's just, it's not the case anymore. It gets murkier and murkier. So I think we have to really just accept that we can't see that full picture and we have to be better at making sense of incomplete data and of disparate data. The in-platform data is always going to be important. It's always going to be what we're optimizing against and what's going to judge how much we're paying for every ad, but it is still directional as part of an overall strategy. We have to have those open channels of communication with the stakeholders, with the sales team to really understand what's happening after the campaigns are served. And whenever you have long customer journeys, that really does necessitate having those very sophisticated optimization strategies that are taking a lot of offline and post-campaign data into account. What's happening down funnel? How is that information getting back up to the people who are managing the campaigns? And it really requires that the people who are managing those campaigns really care, that they understand that the brand success is their success as well. And I think that's really, kind of going back to the first slide and the skills that you need to have as a media manager. If you aren't able to connect those dots and really understand what's happening after the point of the campaigns being served, there's no way to succeed in this spectrum. So we have to make sure that we're creating that feedback loop. And every brand call, we always start with a temp check on how things are going with the brand. How are we tracking towards the bottom line? How are the close rates and all of that? Because that's what helps level set what's happening with the media strategy.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense that if we're not getting good feedback from the sales team, we're going to think we're doing a good job, but we won't know for sure. And that gets us back to the old world of sales and marketing really not feeling like they're in alignment. And there's really no good way to do that other than having the conversations scheduled regularly and to dig into each major opportunity and source where it came from. How did these people find out about us? How did we broaden the footprint that the client has in those accounts? That's that ABM part of the play. So we have one really engaged, champion even, but we have to go beyond him or her to all the people that are going to influence a decision, which people are saying could be as many as 20 or more influencers into a buying decision over that 12-month period. I think this is a really great place to land our webinar. Courtney, if people want to reach you as a first point of contact, how can they get a hold of you?
Sure. So my email is Courtney, Courtney, at allpoints.agency. And that's usually the best way to get in touch with me. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, Courtney Hiller. I should be there among some other options, but you probably would recognize me.
Yeah, and you're using one of those new fancy URLs, .agency. Very cool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Hard to get a good domain name these days.
It is, absolutely. And folks want to reach me, I'm on LinkedIn/in/Ken Lempit. My email's kl@austinlawrence.com. And the website for my demand generation agency for SaaS firms is austinlawrence.com. Courtney Hiller, thanks so much for being here. And to our audience on the webinar, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.